Hi, Anna.
Hey Gemma, thank you so much for having me on today. Very excited to talk to everyone about podcasting and why they should get going doing that for their business.
Definitely. Can you just tell us a little bit about you and what you do for those that haven't heard about you?
So I help entrepreneurs to raise their profile, just move that out of the way, to raise their profile, have more influence in their own industries. So to really kind of put their stamp on their niche so that they become that go-to person, so that they get more referrals, more leads, more sales calls coming in through LinkedIn. And so that also they would then potentially get speaking engagements. And so when they launch a book, or if they are already an author, their book actually already has raving fans ready to go at the time that you launch it. So it's all about creating authority by gaining visibility, and podcasting just one little bit of what I do.
And podcasts have become huge, and most business people are actually creating their own podcasts now. But you're here just to tell us a bit about why podcasting is so important for businesses now.
So podcasts are the fastest growing media out there at the moment. The rise within the last 2 years has been exponential. And what's really fascinating is that a lot of the people who are listening, one, they're really engaged. People tend to become very loyal subscribers to a podcast, probably only listening to 5 or 6 podcasts on their subscription list over and over again. People are listening for somewhere between 5 hours and 12 hours a week of podcasts. So when you think in terms of wanting to get your views out to somebody, get in someone's ear and develop that know, like and trust factor, then podcasts are really, really powerful. There's also been lots of research done in terms of the demographics. So people tend to be educated. They tend to have a fair amount of money to spend, so there's some affluence in the listenership as well, which is really great for anyone who needs to build a podcast for their marketing, because it's such a valuable tool. Now, one of the things I do with my podcast, I've been running a podcast for about 2.5 years, and I'm actually about to launch my second one called Entrepreneurs Get Visible, because I'm launching a second because it's such a valuable tool for me. Is that you need to know how to get it out there. You need to know what to do with it, how it works for your business. And one of the things that I do is I don't deliberately monetize in terms of having adverts on it. But I'm very conscious about building the podcast right from the word go, so that it feeds my business and brings me in additional revenue. So what that, go on, sorry.
That's okay, don't worry. So with a podcast, obviously, I'm huge on social media, and I think that posting every day is so important, and it's like you said, getting visible. But with a podcast, you're obviously not visible. So how would you drive traffic to listen to you?
So the way that a podcast would work is that you would be driving listeners. When people are into podcasts, they're really into podcasts, and more people are accessing them. They're now on Spotify, Stitcher, obviously on iTunes. They are on everybody's phones, and it's free. Now, one of the great things about podcasting, as opposed to YouTube or any other video, is that because people don't have to be watching, don't have to be engaged with it, and it's designed to not be done that way. What it means is people are able to listen when they're running. They can listen in the shower. They can listen while they're cooking. They can listen while they're hoovering. They can listen while they're commuting, in a way that you can't consume video in the same way. So it becomes a very, very personal experience. You're literally inside someone's ear very often. You are with them throughout their daily life, and that becomes a real way to build connection and to build that know, like and trust factor, because you've become a part of someone's daily life in the way that you can't with video. But more and more podcasts are also then being recorded so that they deliberately become YouTube videos afterwards, or you can publish a podcast in video too. And I think podcasts are great if you already have a YouTube platform or you're doing IGTV videos, because you can use your podcast to repurpose your content. And that is a big part of the strategy stuff that I talk about. Just trying to leverage as many places as you possibly can to increase your authority, to increase your SEO, your search engine optimization, to just make sure that you are using as many different platforms across the board to build your business.
Brilliant. And with podcasts, I quite like the fact that you can collaborate with other business owners. So, like a bit what we're doing now is you can bring guests onto your podcast and feature each other that way.
Yeah, and it's amazing there again for building connections, and you get in front of someone else's audience. You as someone who has a podcast that is, people want to get in front of other people's audiences as well. So you become quite valuable to other people in your industry or other people in your field because you have an audience that they want to get in front of. And that works in the other way as well. So if you're strategic and deliberate in who you ask to be your guest, instead of them just coming on and giving their content, you then have the ability to get in front of their audience because they are likely to want to share their episodes with their own people. So you are then able to build your own list, build your own following. And I think that there's just no greater way to do it right now.
Definitely. I think podcast, the word scares people a little bit because how would you go about doing audio? I mean, it's so basic to post and upload on social media and to create a video, but with a podcast, how is the technicality behind it of creating it?
So it can be as simple or as complex as you like. You could, in theory, although I don't recommend it, you could actually just record into your phone and then you upload it straight into a hosting site. So there are various hosting sites. The one that I prefer is Libsyn because it's a little bit more complex, but in a good way, in terms that you are able to then really build in your search engine optimization keywords and specific titles into Libsyn, whereas there are other platforms where you could just literally record on your phone and have it hosted within minutes, but they're not necessarily going to be best for your business. So it doesn't have to be complicated. I have various audio kits that I use. My background is in audio. I'm a multi-award winning Hollywood voice actor, been on the red carpets numerous times for my work, so the audio part was easy for me. And I'm quite passionate about making sure it's easy for other people as well. So my kit at home, I'm just going to lift this microphone. So this is my current favorite microphone. This is called a Blue Yeti. And all this does, it's a USB microphone, which literally just plugs straight into my Mac. There are other microphones that you can get that you could plug straight into your phone. Now, in fact, I do a combination of recording at home, and I do often I do like Facebook Lives that I might decide I'm going to repurpose, and I'll often be out walking my dog and I literally have a special clip-on microphone that I stick into my phone. It's going to be much better quality than just doing it, just using the standard iPhone audio, but it gives you so many more options once you've created good quality audio in the first place for where you then put it. So it doesn't have to be complex, and that's one of the things. I've got a podcast checklist that I'm willing to give out to people at the end, or whenever. I can mention it now and then tell you again at the end. And initially it's a podcast checklist on everything you need to know to launch, and then a few days later I'll be sending you an equipment checklist for the things that I would recommend for different budgets and different recording setups. But podcasting does not have to be difficult at all.
Excellent. And with business owners that are looking to start their own podcast, what would you say the topics need to be around, and what kind of businesses do you think would benefit the most?
I think most businesses would benefit from having a podcast, to be honest. But it's about the topics it's about going back to what is your ideal client wanting to have fixed? What's their problem? What kind of things would they be searching for on Google? And they then need to filter into the topics and the conversations you want to be having on your show, because the titles then are a valuable SEO tool. You can have your keywords and your descriptions absolutely filled with all sorts of things that are going to boost your rankings as well. But you need to go back to your ideal client. What are they struggling with? What do they need to hear? And how can I help them get a solution quickly? And that then becomes what you talk about. So when I first started out a few years ago, I didn't understand all of that element. Because of my massive audio background, I just got my podcast out there and I didn't understand how to make it work. And one of the key things was that I would have really interesting guests, but I would title my podcast episode with their name. That would be the name of the episode. But that doesn't work in terms of search engine optimization. So actually, when I made the tweaks to thinking about what does my ideal client want, what do they want to hear, what would they tune in to listen to, not only did that improve my SEO, but it also meant that it was easier to market and promote the podcast, and people were more likely to listen because they knew what was in it for them. So that's the same with any level of marketing.
Okay, fab. And with a podcast, how do you think is the best way to drive the traffic and promote each session?
So it's about thinking about each episode as a mini launch. So, talking about who you've got coming up, what kind of person they are, what would your community like to have discussed with them, what would be the questions they want to know the answers to. So kind of building that anticipation of who's coming on. And then also when you're promoting it, when it's actually released, telling them what they're going to get. And then in the week, the weeks after it's gone out, that particular episode, referring back to it again and again and again. If you've got this problem, go to this. So many of us now are in or have our own Facebook communities. But if you can drive people to a specific episode that answers a specific question that they have in a group, they are highly likely to click on it and listen straight away. Much more so than clicking on a blog, because they can literally hear the voice, they can carry on with their work, and it's not interrupting their workflow.
Brilliant. What do you blog about and podcast about, Anna? And how do you drive the traffic to your?
So my current podcast is called Inspiring Success Podcast, and it initially started with my previous brand, Inspiring Mummy Club. So mine's had a massive arc of development, and that's the amazing thing about podcasts, is you can kind of take them with you. I blog about how to have more success in your business, how to manage that with your work life, how to manage that with your family, but how you need to think to get ahead. My new podcast, which will be coming out on the 5th of October, will supersede what's gone before, and it's entirely about really how you build your personal brand, how you build authority, how you stand out from the crowd in your industry. So everything that I create for that podcast now will have the end goal in mind. It will always be about my listener and what I want them to get out of listening, which then makes marketing it so much easier, because it's not about me, it's not about me promoting the show, it's about what I'm giving to other people. And one of the interesting things is, in this kind of entrepreneurial and coaching space, is that the more value you can demonstrate early on for free, the more people are bought into you, the more they trust you, the more when it comes to launching or selling, they are likely to jump. So I think podcasting is a really valuable tool for that.
And how long are your podcasts?
So my podcast episodes vary. I do some where it's very casual, it's from me talking, it's things I've learned, things I've experienced, and they would probably be somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes. Then when I have a guest, sometimes they could be between, I'd say 25 to 45 minutes. I don't worry too much about the length. I don't tend to go over 45 minutes because most of my listeners are time poor, and I want them to be able to consume an episode in a time frame that suits them. So but that's the amazing thing with a podcast, there is no fixed format, there is no fixed frequency. I tend to prefer to do a weekly podcast. Some people do monthly, some people do daily, some people do twice a week. For example, in the launch of my new podcast, I'll be going live. I'll be doing it every day for 30 days to get my core content out there. And then I'll revert to a weekly format. But you make it what you want. And as long as you tell your listeners what you're doing, then everybody's happy.
Lovely. And do you have a lot of active listeners on your podcast?
Yes, I have thousands and thousands of active listeners.
Brilliant.
And it's been an amazing, amazing thing for me. So once I learned how to make it work for my business, as opposed to just doing a podcast, is that it's become just the most important funnel in my business. So people find the podcast, or maybe I promoted it, or they found it through Spotify or iTunes, and then they'll listen, and then they'll listen again and again and again and again if they like what they hear. So by the time someone decides to reach out, to contact me, to work with me, they feel like they know me. Because my podcasts are very, very, like I do all my trainings, very, very down to earth. I don't edit it to within an inch of its life. People do feel like they've met me and they know me and they understand my energy and what I'm about. So what I've seen is an increase in people literally emailing me to book my high-end packages, my 3-month coaching or my 6-month masterminds. even without necessarily knowing the fee, because they know I'm the person for them, because they resonate very strongly with who I am.
People, and that's what marketing is all about now. You have to be very personable, and I think, like you were saying, that's why podcasts have become so big, because we can post on social media photos of us all day long or do videos of us, but the minute they start hearing us speak regularly, it definitely impacts your personal brand.
Yeah, absolutely. And people feel like they know you. And that's one of the key marketing things, is we like people who are like us, or we think are like us. And a podcast enables you to get your personality across, who you are, what you really stand for, in just such an easy, natural way. And particularly in interviews as well. Once you get over those kind of first few initial interviews, you can just have great conversations with people, and that's fascinating. So one of the things I deliberately do is I leave my conversations unscripted, unplanned, and we see what happens. We have a general topic we're discussing, but all sorts of wonderful random things come out, and that, you know, my listeners say that they love that, because they feel like they know me. They feel like they've literally been a fly on a wall on an interesting conversation, rather than us having something scripted that's very stilted.
Yeah, I completely agree. No one likes the script. You've got to be real. You've got to be natural and authentic.
Yeah, and I have been a guest on podcasts before, where I've literally, doesn't matter what I've said, they have then come back with, you know, the question off their list. And I don't think that's a particularly engaging way to create content personally. But so you asked earlier about how you then market and promote your podcast. So I would say to anyone who's already using social media, you've already got the avenues to drive people to your podcast. So it's a question of just being that, you know, building the podcast into your social media. It's just an added element of how people can find you and understand what value you give. So it's exactly the same as you would be doing on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, but it's another thing that you can be talking about, and it's really valuable for that.
How would you advise one of your podcast people to get onto Spotify or iTunes?
So when you create, the big giant in podcasting is still iTunes. They own nearly 92% of the entire industry currently. So you want to make sure you get onto iTunes. Spotify are making big moves to come up behind them in terms of podcasts. So it'll be interesting to see what shifts there are over the next couple of years. But more and more people will be listening. That's really crucial to understand. So in terms of getting your account up onto iTunes, that's something I help people with. You have to create a particular account with them as a podcaster. And then once you have met all of their criteria, your show then goes live. But you need to have a certain amount of episodes ready to go, the right imagery ready to go. So you make sure that you get through all of iTunes' hoops. But in order, so you create that first, but you also sign up then with a host. So I talked a little bit before about a company called Libsyn. There are other ones called Anchor and Podbean, where you create an account essentially, a little bit like you would on YouTube. And on YouTube, that's where you upload your video. So there's something called Libsyn, where you would upload your audio, upload your descriptions, your keywords, and then they would push it out to your iTunes account, and then potentially any other directories such as Spotify or Stitcher. They're the big ones. And then there's about 8 others that they can push out to you if you connect your account in that way. So a lot of the work is done for you. In terms of getting it onto the directories, where people are literally going in and searching for the shows that they want. So, you know, you're coming up in those search terms. iTunes is really well attached to Google as well. So that kind of happens for itself. So I get listeners who don't follow me anywhere else, who have found me literally from doing searches, and then join my Facebook group, then join my membership, then want to come and coach with me. The other powerful thing that I've encountered is that I get more and more referrals for speaking opportunities, which again, we all know that if you get in front of the right people, that can be really powerful for your brand anyway. Because people feel like they know you, they want to refer you, they want to recommend you if you're creating great content.
It's true what you say. Every community, whether it's on your Facebook, on your Instagram, on your podcast, you have different people listening or tuning, engaging with your brand. With your podcast, you said they come directly to you from there. How do you think they find you? Where do you think your podcast is most active?
So it's mostly people are listening on iTunes. It's still the most go-to place for listeners. But people are finding me everywhere. I'm on about 10 different directories at the moment. So once people love podcasts and understand how they can learn and grow and develop whilst out doing the most mundane chores, you'd be surprised at where people are listening. And as I said, like, once people find a podcast they love, they're very, very loyal. And I think, that's brilliant. And you want to make the most of that. And I think very often, if you're strategic in how you create your podcast in the first place, you can create each episode to drive people, to drive your traffic, your listeners, your raving fans to a particular place. So the podcast I'm creating at the moment, I will be driving people to one page on my website where there will be numerous free resources, numerous ways that they can join my community. And that will become the place that they go. And that will be mentioned on every single episode, because it's strategic, because my podcast doesn't just stand alone. It drives traffic to me and to my email list and to all of my communities. And vice versa. My communities then drive people to listen to my podcast because I'm promoting them within those spaces, promoting it to those spaces as well. So they kind of work in tandem.
So tell us a little bit about your new podcast and why you've sort of driven away from Inspiring Success.
I'm currently going through a massive rebrand because I've got my first new book coming out. My first book is coming out at the end of November, which is called Get Visible, How to Have More Impact, Influence and Income. And my second book is out early next year. And again, my work's really shifting towards this visibility and impact piece. And I felt very strongly that the Inspiring Success brand, because it had come off the back of Inspiring Mummy Club, which was my first online business, that I've grown, I've evolved, I've learned, I've up-leveled, and I didn't want to just rebrand the same podcast again. I wanted something that's really got a powerful kick from the word go, and I've learned so much about podcasting and about this entrepreneurial space over the last 3 years, and I just wanted to have a completely fresh start, if you like, to demonstrate exactly what I do, how it works, and take that to the next level. So I'm a big believer. That if you have an idea, you should just get on and do it. And now it's the time for me to just take all my learnings and just take it up a notch. So that's why I'm doing
exciting.
Yeah, it's a really exciting 6 months for me. It's just, I've been working for the last 6 months. I've been mentored by one of the UK's leading entrepreneurs. You may have heard of Rob Moore. He's a 15 times bestseller in terms of the self-development and business and property space. And I've been taking part in a documentary where he's been working with 40 entrepreneurs to completely transform our businesses from the inside and up. And obviously I've learned an awful lot by having him and his team on my business and coaching me, developing me, and it's all kind of coincided with my new podcast launch and my new book launch. So very exciting times. And his podcast is called The Disruptive Entrepreneur, and it is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, most popular podcast for entrepreneurs in the UK. And obviously I've been working very closely with their team to bring out all of this stuff. And the next natural progression really is for me to be teaching people how to do podcasts because of my audio background. There's so many people in the podcasting space is still really new. It's been around for, I can't remember exactly when it started, but it's exploding very quickly. So
I can see that a lot of people start their own podcasts.
But there's lots of people telling people how to do it, but they don't necessarily have the audio experience. And I just felt there's some real there's a kind of good marriage really between my entrepreneurial knowledge and my drive for success and all of those things and the audio stuff that I can bring to the table. But I don't want people to have a podcast that doesn't go anywhere, because I had that for the first 6 months, and that does become a headache, and it can feel like a bit laborious. I
Mm.
suppose it's no different to when you say, yeah, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and then, you know, you've done your first 30 videos and you've got to keep going. What do you do with it then? I want people to start a podcast and know why it works for their business. So it then becomes a priority in their business, and they want to put energy and excitement into it because it's worth it for them, and they can see the results.
Absolutely. So tell us about your course.
So my course is running as a beta version at the moment. So I've got my kind of guinea pigs going through it, and it is an 8-week course that takes people right from the beginning. Like, what should you even podcast about? What is your business really about? What are you really about? The planning stages, the research that you need to do to see who are your competitors potentially, to do research around the keywords. You know, even all the IP, the intellectual property stuff. Has someone else got the name you're thinking of using? Why would you do your podcast in the first place? Like, what's its purpose for you? Is it to build your brand, or is it to genuinely, you know, share inspiring stories? What's it for? What's its function? And then also for your ideal client, your ideal listener, what are they going to get? Because they have to get something, or otherwise, what's the point? And then we go right the way through to what you need to research in terms of artwork to make sure it stands out, what you need to know about equipment to make it easy for you, how to repurpose what you've already got. We look into basic editing and recording. I make it as simple as possible to get the best quality sound. Although I also do have a podcast production agency where if people don't want to do that bit for themselves, then they can outsource that to my company and we can get that done for them. We look into things like how you find the music and how you get the right license for the music for your podcast and the kind of energy you want your podcast to have. The script you need in your intro, your outro. I talk about the whys, the wherefores, where you'd want to be driving people to. And then how it works for your business. So this is the key part. This is why my course isn't just get your podcast out there. We look at what are you building, what are you driving people towards. So what's the long-term aim for your business, and how are you going to build essentially a podcast listener community of raving fans and then monetize them. But not necessarily advertising on the podcast, which is a possibility, but I tend not to do that. How you're then going to bring people into your world so that you can market to them more and sell to them more. And then finally, like how you launch this, how you have a successful launch, the kind of things you need to do, the things you need to think about in terms of getting a launch team together to make your podcast go bang in the first couple of months. What kind of strategies you need to implement to do that, and how you would know that it was being successful, and the ongoing promotion then for a search engine optimization respect. We also look at like how to get good guests in, good quality guests, where to source them, how to streamline that process. I'm a big believer that your podcast should be super simple. So I tend to record mine one day in the month, and I might bang out 5 or 6 episodes, back-to-back interviews, and I don't touch it for another month. So because it doesn't have to be difficult, it doesn't have to take up loads of time if you're organized and you know what you're doing. So that's my course. We're in beta at the moment. We're on week 4, and I'm going to be launching it again early in the new year.
And how long is the course, and how much is that?
So the course is 8 weeks long, and the course is £1,400. At the moment, as I said, we've done it in beta at the moment. We're getting already amazing results from people. Their podcasts. The course is designed to get your podcast launched by week 8. So it's really for people who just want to make sure it works for them and actually, you know, have their hand held to get through that process. But as I was saying, I've got this podcast checklist that covers everything that I've talked about today, the things you need to be thinking about as you go forward, so that if you are potentially interested in having a chat about maybe working one-to-one to build this into your strategy, or you want more information on the course as it becomes available in the early new year, then the best way to do that is to grab the checklist and have a little look. As I said, there's going to be recommendations for the equipment as well, just to make that as streamlined as possible, because I don't think it should be difficult.
Lovely. Thanks so much. How do we sign up to your course?
So the best way is to find out about the checklist. So if you go to annaparkernaples.co.uk/podcast checklist, all one word. So again, annaparkernaples.co.uk podcast checklist, then you would be able to grab the download and find out really my top tips on how to get started and make sure it actually works for your business. Because otherwise, what's it for? And I think my kind of parting shot on in terms of podcasting is that if you're already doing video, if you're already doing IGTV, if you're already thinking, I want to increase my profile and I want to charge more money for it, podcasting is a simple and effective way to do it if you do it right, if you do it correct. And yeah, I love it. I think it's easy to create, and it's easy to outsource if you don't want to do any of the editing yourself, if you don't want to upload it anywhere else, if you don't want to write your own show notes. There are so many people who can help you to do all of those bits. All you need to do is switch your microphone on and talk. That's pretty much it.
We just have to be everywhere every time, basically. And now the podcast is another additional channel that we need to be on.
But if you're already creating YouTube content, why wouldn't you just use that content and whack it up onto a podcast? Because you will have a very different listener. People who are listening to podcasts probably aren't big fans of YouTube.
There's a different audience on every platform, isn't there?
Yeah, but they're still your ideal client. They're still there.
Yeah.
And they probably have more money. So it's worth thinking about.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. And
you're also welcome.
I will upload this onto my YouTube channel and possibly my podcast.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, well, you know where to come if you want some help.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Anyone wanting more information, do get in touch with me, annaparkernaples.co.uk, or obviously all over my social media. I'm not hard to find. So come find me at Instagram, my Facebook page, or on LinkedIn, or whichever is your preference. Great.
Thanks. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.